Hello everyone, welcome again to my channel. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the latest version of JW Broadcasting for November 2015. There is a section of that broadcasting where Mark Sanderson talks about wanting people to return to Jehovah. And by this, of course, he means he wants them to go back to Jehovah's organization, aka he wants them to be Jehovah's Witnesses again. And he makes some interesting points. I wrote a whole bunch of stuff down. He talks about politicians wanting your vote but not knowing who you are, but Jehovah draws us to him and to his son and his organization. And he talks about if you've drifted from Jehovah's organization, has he forgotten you? And the answer is no. And there's a bunch of other stuff he says. He quotes the August 15th, 2015 Watchtower, where he asks how bad you expect conditions to become before the Great Tribulation. If it became so bad that even skeptics didn't doubt the prophecies, well, then that wouldn't make any sense. So he's using all this as an argument that basically things don't have to get that bad before the Great Tribulation happens. And he not so subtly, in the multiple times, makes the point that basically if you are not going to the meetings and not going out in field service, you are basically worthless in Jehovah's eyes. Jehovah still loves you, but he wants you to come back and to go to meetings and to go in service, and then he'll love you again. So anyways, and of course, as always, he talks about how urgent this is, because we're so close to the times of the end. Well, I just wanted to share some of our lovely spiritual heritage, a gem from my own personal childhood. This is from the bound volume of the Watchtower from 1984. Let me show you. So there you see it, 1984 bound volume. Maybe some of you remember this, maybe some of you don't. 1914, the generation that will not pass away. And the date, May 15th, 1984. See all those people? They've all been dead for at least 10 years. So let's share the spiritual blessings that are to be found in this article. I'm going to read that paragraph. It says, if Jesus used generation in that sense, and we apply it to 1914, then the babies of that generation are now 70 years old or older, and others alive in 1914 are in their 80s or 90s, a few even having reached 100. There are still many millions of that generation alive. Some of them will by no means pass away until all things occur. Okay, so what sense is Jesus using the word generation in? Well, let me read the paragraph above that, this one, and this will tell you what generation meant in 1984. It says the Greek word rendered generation in the Bible has been defined as those born at the same time. Associated with this is the meaning, the body of one's contemporaries in age, from the New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology. The sum total of those born at the same time, expanded to include all those living at a given time, generation, contemporaries. That's from a Greek-English lexicon of the New Testament from Walter Bauer's 5th edition, 1985. These definitions embrace both those born around the time of a historic event and all those alive at that time. So back then, the understanding was that even babies, or it was a literal thing, and that the babies of that generation were 70 years old, and based on that, some of them would not pass away until Armageddon happened. Well, did that happen? I'll let you be the judge of that, but the answer is obviously no. No, that did not happen. So let's go and see further from that same edition of the Watchtower some of the spiritual gems that are there. So on page 16 of that article, I'm going to read paragraph 10. It says, count if you will the blessings that Jehovah's slaves have received. Among other things, they enjoy accurate knowledge concerning Jesus Christ's kingly presence since 1914, the clear demarcation between God's visible organization and Satan's, the far-reaching nature of the preaching works to be done before the end of Satan's world, the sacredness of blood, blah blah blah. So they talk about the restoration of things. But notice that we had an accurate knowledge back in 1984 concerning Jesus Christ's kingly presence since 1914. And an accurate knowledge would also involve understanding what that meant. And according to current beliefs, Jehovah's Witnesses actually did not understand the word generation in 1984. How accurate was their knowledge? So what else can we find here? There was something else. But they really used that issue to pound home how 1914 is going to be, or the generation that saw 1914 would be alive before the end of Armageddon. And the article directly before that, so the May 1st, 1984 Watchtower, also was about 1914. 1914 and you. May 1st, 1984. So, was this just an anomaly? Those two watchtowers just happened to be something that was printed offhand? Well, let's take a look at something else. The book that used to be studied during the Bible study, or the congregation book studies they called it, You Can Live Forever in Paradise on Earth. This is one of the original editions, copyright 1982. And I've showed this before, but I just want to show this again. Page, what is it? I want to say, here we are. Page 154, paragraph 8. Notice the picture, 1914 Armageddon. It says, some of the generation living in 1914 will see the end of this system of things and survive it. So there you have it. Paragraph 8. After drawing attention to the many things that have marked the period from 1914 onward, Jesus said, this generation will by no means pass away until all these things, including the end of the system, in brackets, occur. Which generation did Jesus mean? He meant the generation of people who were living in 1914. Those persons yet remaining of that generation are now very old. However, some of them will still be alive to see the end of this wicked system. So of this we can be certain. Surely now there will be a sudden end to all wickedness and wicked people at Armageddon. And I'll put that back up there. You can pause it and read it for yourself, or you can go to your local Kingdom Hall and get this book out of the library and read it for yourself there. So, Mark Sanderson tries to make the point that it is urgent that we come out of the world and back into Jehovah's organization because of how close we are to the end of the system of things. However, that is what Jehovah's Witnesses always say. And back in 1982 and 1984, when I was a young child, they told us in no uncertain terms that the world would end, Armageddon would come, before the generation that saw the events in 1914 passed away. And they even went so far as to make the point that you have seen that the babies that were born in 1914 were at least 70 years old in 1984. That's 30 years ago. So that generation is dead and gone. They're buried. And the picture that was on that watchtower was a number of really old people who were supposed to be alive to see Armageddon, and they're not. So keep in mind the organization that printed these things. Jehovah's Witnesses call themselves Jehovah's Organization. This is God's organization that prints these things. So when they do that, according to their own definition, they are speaking in the name of God. When they speak in the name of God, things that do not come true, that makes them false prophets. So if you watch that broadcasting and you watch Mark Sanderson's argumentation, he tries to act like he's so loving and like they'll still love you, but the truth is they don't love you until you've returned and are active in their program of service, until you're going to the meetings and until you are getting out in field service. In fact, they in not so many words, they say that if you're not doing those things, you're worthless. But Jehovah still wants you to come back so that you can do those things again and so that you can again have value. Now the problem there is that's a very destructive way to look at life, and that's very harmful to many people. A lot of people might realize that something's wrong and separate themselves to some degree, but they can still be racked with the fear and the guilt that they're worthless because they're not with God's only organization. The problem here is this organization has a track record 130 years long of saying that the end is coming at some given time, and then it doesn't happen. The first notable failure was 1914. Charles Taze Russell predicted 1914 would see the end of Armageddon with the full establishment of God's kingdom on earth. That didn't happen. Charles Taze Russell called himself God's mouthpiece, meaning he was speaking for God. So when his predictions didn't come true, that made him a false prophet. And after he passed away, Rutherford made multiple predictions as well. In the 20s, there was the campaign, Millions Now Living Will Never Die. They were supposed to see the ancient worthies resurrected in 1925, which would have to indicate that Armageddon would be over by 1925. Before Rutherford died, he predicted there was just a few short months remaining in the early 40s. That didn't happen. In the Fred Franz era, they came up with the year of 1975, when 6,000 years of history would end, and how it wouldn't be really appropriate for that to coincide with Jesus being the Lord of the Sabbath, and they built up expectations that 75 was going to be it. Then when that didn't happen, they said, "Oh, we never said that. That's not what we meant. You shouldn't have believed us." So there's a history as long as the organization has existed where they make predictions, those predictions do not come true, and then you are expected to not blame the organization who is supposed to be speaking in the name of God for making a false prediction. Why would anybody want to go back to that? So anyways, that's another thought I had. It's a point that I've made before, but it demonstrates a couple things in my mind. I'm not sure if the governing body are thoroughly deluded or if they really just like having the power. I keep going back and forth between those two. I would like to believe they're thoroughly deluded, but if they have to any degree read their history, it would be really hard to do that. But that being said, I also do appreciate the fact that there is a very strong control that's exerted on people that are in that organization that causes them to shut their mind off when they see things that prove that they don't have the truth. And it's quite possible, in fact more probable than not, that those governing body members are themselves under that influence. For the rest of us, though, we only have to look at their own literature to see the truth about them. So I just wanted to make that point because, once again, the governing body are making fools of themselves in their broadcasting issues. So thanks for watching.